One.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Listen, my friends, I'm here with one of the brilliant brains of this country, whom I call my friend and my brother, Jonah Katende. Incredibly, Jonah Katende. Is it synonymous with the katende is usually suigeneris or what? Because I know some of my friends like Sim Katende, Soji Katende, the Katende family, JW Katende, all of those are suigeneris in their own rights. What's it with the katende name?
I'm not so sure. I have not been so around many katendes actually. So it is not something that I can say that I have generally observed, and I also would want to argue that we cannot limit intelligence to names.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I mean, from where I come from, Lubogo is synonymous with people who are suigeneris. So even if you don't belong to a Logan, you simply give your child the name Lubogo, you find yourself flying higher. Anyway, that was a joke.
I've heard a funny story of a certain wealthy man in America that having become powerful went around telling people to drop that name, especially if they did not have the money.
Wow. I like that. Anyways, what is in a name? You remember that? I think it was what? Romeo and Juliet, right? So what is in a name? That we call a rose can still smell sweet even if called any other name. Guess what? That very statement was told to Malcolm X. And Malcolm X said there's everything in a name. If a name can get you a job, if you can change your name and get a job, then there's everything in the name. So he actually he said Shakespeare was living in the wrong time. If Shakespeare was living in the time when Malcolm X was living, then he would have discovered that there's everything in the name. Anyway.
Malcolm X eventually abandoned his name, Kellito.
I know.
Because it was Malcolm Kellito.
That's
he
right.
was born that. So it would actually be MLK, rightly as well.
I know. Anyways, Jonah, tell me something about the game of chess. Why am I interested in the game of chess? Because in one of my alma maters, when I was studying there, the Reverend D. Grimes used to emphasize the game of chess to the extent that you could even play human chess, where they could actually put human beings by way of dressing them in different chess pieces. And eventually, and I know chess for a fact has an input in terms of intelligence in a way. I know some of the best people we've had here in chess, including one of my OB from one of my alma mater, whom I eventually met in King's College, Budo. Actually, who went to be the best chess player, I think, in Uganda, was actually a very brilliant guy. I don't remember any guys, beginning from the Grayson Subugas, Simon Wagabonos and the likes, who were really average students. So what is it in this game of chess that tends to give people that over edge in terms of comprehension and appreciation of issues? And as you argue that, you'll also make a distinction between another game that I got to know was actually more difficult than chess, which is called Go game. Go game, I was surprised that Go game is actually the more difficult one. But in our times, we used to hear people like Gary Kasparov, who were grandmasters, and so we could really get excited about them. So tell me about chess generally.
So chess is a very nice game. I have been playing it for quite a long time. Not necessarily in terms of competitions, but it's something that I actually do for leisure. It's something that I play literally every day, even subconsciously. I just open my computer, I type in chess.com, and then I start playing the game. So chess is a game that was built on the idea of strategy. Used a lot in the ancient times in places like India, later on adopted in Europe, used for calculation of war. So because it involves strategy, it is a game that has been known to sharpen the minds of people in developing strategies that are going to break through the enemy's defense and give you a very brilliant win. So if you notice, the game has white and black pieces, and despite the fact that there are many pieces on the board and that there are usually two players on the board, there can only be one winner. So black is usually known for playing a defensive role, even though that can change depending on the strategies of the player. And white is known to play the attack. Usually plays fast, but also we've seen places where white can actually also play defensive. So it's a game whereby one is defending and then one is attacking. So the winner is that one who is able to put forth strategies that are going to penetrate and break through the opposer's defenses, either in the quickest way possible. That explains the time format called bullets or blitz, or in a lengthier way, but either winning on points or winning on the number of pieces captured, or winning by the opponent's design of the game. So you mentioned brilliant guys like Gary Kasparov. He's considered by some to be the greatest chess player of all time, but I personally consider Robert James Fischer as the greatest chess player of all time. That is my personal choice because of the achievements that Bobby Fischer managed to get during his time.
And what were those achievements?
Well, Bobby Fischer lived at a time when the entire chess industry was dominated by the Soviet Union.
Okay.
Since around 1928, we saw that from José Raúl Capablanca, most of the grandmasters that followed were Russian. We were talking about the likes of Alexander Alexandrovich Karyahin. This is a guy who died in 1946 when he was still the reigning world champion. Yes, he lost the title a little bit in between the 1930s, but he would later regain the title and die while holding the title. A day before, he would verse a fellow Russian, Mikhail Botvinnik. Botvinnik would go on to hold the title, lose it a little bit to Vasily Smyslov, get the title back, lose it to Mikhail Tal, all those are Russians, lose it to Tigran Vatanovich Petrosian, those are Russians. Petrosian would lose the title to Boris Vasilyevich Spassky, those are Russians. Now the only person who grew up to penetrate that Russian dominance of the chess industry at the time was the American Grandmaster Robert James Fischer. He lived at a time when the Russians, chess was organized in different time formats and then in different ways. So in order for you to become a world champion, you had to first of all be a Grandmaster in your country. Let's say like appear among the top 3 in you appear among the top 3 in the national championship tournament. Now, Fischer had stopped playing the American chess championships, I think around 1964, when he won the American tournament with a perfect score. He won all the games, he lost none, he drew none. In fact, in America, there is something called the Fischer Prize. But then after that, he was like, no one in America can challenge me, I'm not playing anymore in American tournaments. But around the 1970s, Fischer hadn't played, but some people thought that no one actually could stand against the Russians. There was a Danish grandmaster called Bent Larsen that believed that he was good, but the Americans were convinced that it is only Fischer that could stand against the Russians. So one of the players, one of the top 3, Paul Benko, if you remember well, sacrificed his position and he let Fischer play. Now after there you had to play the zonal tournament, then the interzonal tournament. Now the best 8 in the interzonal tournament would play something called the candidates tournament. You would reach the candidates tournament and you find that 6 of the guys are Russians. And Bobby Fischer felt like that was quite unfair because you're versing 6 Russians. Some of the Russians would probably give themselves draws and allow the Russian to have the highest points.
I know.
So in order for you to become the best in the candidates tournament, to go and challenge the reigning world champion, you had to really prove yourself through.
Yes.
So Fischer won the zonal tournament, he won the interzonal tournament. Now he came to the candidates tournament. At the quarterfinals, he defeated a Russian grandmaster called Mark Taimanov, 6-0. He first defeated Bent Larsen, Mark Taimanov, all of those 6-0. Then he faced the former two-time world champion, Tigran Petrosian. He defeated him 6.5 to 6.5. That was the semis. Finally reaching the finals and defeating the man himself, Boris Spassky, by game 10-1. Actually, in that match, it's called actually the match of the century, Fischer received an applause in game 6 because Spassky always thought that Fischer would come with open he didn't expect most openings from Fischer. And there were memes in Russia that, but Spassky, what if he doesn't play the usual E4? What would you do? So Spassky would always respond that I would just play that Tatakova variation, and I've never lost a game in that Tatakova variation. So in that, Spassky was such an authority in that variation that he had never lost a game with the black pieces.
Right.
Now game 6, called the applause, was actually Fischer starting, not using E4, he brought across opening on the board. And just like he had promised, Boris Vasiljevich Spassky displayed the Tatakova variation on the board. But to his surprise, he was outsmarted where he was strongest.
Wow.
Stand up.
So tell me,
and applaud.
Tell me certain. I know there's a time when human beings started playing artificial intelligence or machines for that purpose.
Yeah.
Machines like Deep Blue.
Yes.
So tell me some story about the first person to have played Deep Blue, or perhaps a machine for that purpose, and how it transcended up to where it is today.
So there were guys in earlier years. Garry Kasparov became a world chess champion, I think, in 1987, defeating Anatoly Karpov, a fellow Russian, who had held the title for some time. Actually, Fischer refused to play the match in 1975. And when he refused to play the match, the title was given to Karpov. So Karpov won that title, defeat Viktor Korchnoi and a lot of other guys across the board until a series of matches with Garry Kasparov, eventually Kasparov becoming the champion. Now before then, there was some bit of tests, computers versing grandmasters, but serious strong machines were started to be seen in 1996 with Garry Kasparov battling a computer called Deep Thought. He would eventually come out victorious. And the man he was, you can imagine, holding the title from 1987, and he was still the reigning world champion by 1996. And all the tabloids were talking about you. You were such a strong player. Indeed, he was. In fact, he was.
So Garry defeats Deep Blue.
Deep Thought.
Deep Thought. Then what happens after that?
In 1997, they bring back Deep Blue.
Deep Blue, yes.
It would humiliate him.
So it humiliated Garry Kasparov.
Well, they played a series of matches, but one of the matches that annoyed Garry Kasparov, which would eventually result into the loss of the match. You know, a match would involve sometimes several games.
Yes.
But his anger was about this particular game where Deep Blue defeated him in less than 15 moves. And he became the first world champion to be defeated by a computer. He would request IBM to bring back Deep Blue. IBM would refuse. He would go on to play more championships, eventually losing the title in 2001, Vladimir Kramnik. So, but beyond that, more computers would be developed.
Like which one?
Like Stockfish.
Stockfish, yes.
Like Alpha Zero,
Alpha
like
Zero.
Relaxes. Very strong engines that rely on previously generated data. You know, like Deep Blue was said to have calculated 3 million moves in a second. But computers which came later, like for example, the strongest engine currently is Stockfish 12. No one can defeat it. No one can defeat Stockfish 10. These are very strong engines. Now, yeah, guys have used artificial intelligence not only to create a database of chess games so that the engine would know what to play, but also now these engines are too smart. They create their own moves
and adapt, yes.
on the board.
And
In fact, we have seen a match between Stockfish 8 and Alpha 0.
So these are machines playing against one another.
Playing against another.
Yes.
Either it was Alpha 0 or Lila Chess, but Stockfish 8 annihilated the opponent.
There's a point you made one time when you said there was a machine that beat some guy, but then they refused to bring it back. And this
That
guy,
was Deep Blue.
yes, and then this guy assumed that it wasn't the machine playing
Yes,
something else.
yes.
What was that story?
So that story was that, so you see, Deep Blue made a move that Garry Kasparov believed a computer could not make. You know, like what makes you a strong grandmaster, history has said, is partly your ability to calculate like 15 moves ahead. So this computer had outseen, it had outsmarted, the move was too strong that it weakened the grandmaster, the best of the world at the time.
Yes.
So he requested the computer to be brought back for a match. Of course, like I said, IBM refused. Now, some people claimed, including Garry Kasparov, that there must have been a human player,
Probably Fisher.
probably Fisher. Why? Because why people were suspecting Fisher is that Fisher had stopped playing open chess tournaments in the early 1970s. However, Fisher would go on certain online platforms in courts and defeat all the players. So there is a grandmaster called Nigel Short. He lost 6 games, I think, to 0 to a certain player who was anonymous. Nigel Short, the grandmaster he is and the strong player he is, never expected to lose to such a strong player at such a high margin. I think it was 7-0. But Nigel Short says that in his message with this anonymous player, he asked him, "Do you know Armando Acevedo?" And Nigel Short, and the anonymous player responded instantly. Nigel Short said, "This was instant." They replied, 1970. And then it was said that Fisher had played one game with Acevedo in 1970. One game. So Nigel Short was convinced that the tactical genius Bobby Fischer must have been behind that anonymous
Defeat of
player who defeated himself.
Okay.
And so it was not surprising for IBM in courts to have got Fisher again, placed him behind Deep Blue to defeat Garry Kasparov.
Okay, there we go. So basically here we understand the origin of chess has actually been debated among historians, and it's believed that it may have originated from northern India or eastern Iran during the 6th century. But most of it is that the fact that it was it came out of 4 divisions of the military. It's like something that people adapted out of military struggles or endeavors. I know that next time, with the interest of time, we'll be discussing The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and then we'll probably get to understand some of those military strategies, and then we'll also get into books like of Robert Greene, Napoleon Hill, and many of those stuff. So thank you, Mr. Katende. Yes, what do you have to say in conclusion? Yes.
You've talked about the fact that it is right, like Northern India. You've talked about the fact that it was partly a simulation of what was happening in the military struggles. So that is why the chess game has the knight, the bishop,
the king,
the
pawns,
the queen, the pawns, the rooks.
Right.
Yeah, something like that. So it's actually a game that most of the military generals that I've read about very close with. Even the Chinese, if you look at the Chinese history, at least if they would not play, they were playing a certain version of chess at their time that was a little bit different. You're talking about, you've highlighted about a genius, Sun Tzu, 544 BC, right to the 13 chapters of the Art of War. We look at people like Zhuge Liang, he was also called Kong Ming. He also wrote something called Kong Ming's Art of War. He wrote the 7 Principal Things, 6 Dangers. Actually, he wrote the 8 Principal Things, the 7 Precautions, the 6 Dangers, and then the 5 Fears of War. He was an inventor, just that much of his work has been lost in time.
We will also, with time, discuss people like the guy who wrote this book of The Godfather, Mary Puzzle, and then also John Ford, who wrote the book of The Art of Remembering Everything, which he said moonwalking with Einstein. John Ford went ahead and won all the memory competitions in America, and those are interesting stories that we got to know how he actually translated himself from, because his mother or his grandmother had actually Alzheimer's disease, so he could easily forget everything. So in memory of her grandmother, his grandmother decided to adapt his brain to remember. This is a guy, if you just flip the cards once like this, and then he would virtually remember every card where it was, and it tells you how the brain operates in terms of memory palaces and how you can train your brain to remember everything.
Recent research has shown that the brain is structured in such a way that part of what you remember, it kind of captures things that are important to us. So some people kind of structure their brains in such a way that it will not forget events of the present by kind of making them appear more important in their meditation or something like that. Yeah, but I'm one of the people that have analyzed the entire idea of IQ tests and things like that. And there is a lady called Marilyn Vosavant. She was named, I think, the most intelligent person in America for 3 consecutive times.
Wow.
She, in 1987, 88, 89, she used to have, and years past, she used to have a certain column in newspapers, and people would ask her kind of questions. Actually, Vosavant, it's a French word that kind of means to know, so some people were kind of checking her to be all-knowing.
And when you talk about IQ, what is her IQ level? Because I know for a fact that average Ugandan have an IQ of about 80. I researched on that, and the best in Africa is about 100, who are Nigerians, by the way. Incredibly. I wouldn't give it the lowest.
I have a Ugandan friend who, okay, if you're talking about average, perhaps yes, but I have a friend who has an IQ of around 145.
Wow, that's pretty high.
Yeah, the IQ test was developed in 1904 as the Simon Barnett scale. It was developed by, of course, as you can hear, Simon. And his friend at the time who felt that, and this was a test that was developed to differentiate kids that were naturally lazy from those that were actually smart.
True. Disabled in a way.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
In different,
Special needs. They call it special needs.
Yeah. So I am not one guy who believes a lot in IQ tests because of what they have come out to be. The guy with the highest recorded IQ score in history was William James Sidis. People like Einstein, Newton don't go above 200. And then you have currently one of the guys that have the highest IQ is Terence Tao, who's a math professor, I think at Princeton, with around 235. Those are very, very high scores. But if you study the lives of these different guys, I mean, you can't really, in my opinion, just judge. Okay, Garry Kasparov was also considered to have a high IQ because of his genius at chess, but you can't really judge someone's IQ based on just a few mathematical, I'm not calling math simple, but if someone in that regard doesn't have a background in math, then it puts them at a disadvantage because most of the IQ tests are either going to bring something that is mathematically related at some point.
Okay.
Then there is a guy, the guy who was considered the smartest man in America between 2010 and 2020. There were some years in which he was considered the smartest man in America. Christopher Langan, it's a guy who was one time worked as a bouncer, worked as a bodyguard, worked in a club, lifted weights, but he was later on he he concentrated himself to some level of physics and figuring out certain things. So I would argue that yes, the IQ test could be one of the indicators of that someone is in the special category, but it's a little bit overrated. Like George the poet said that talent doesn't die, it just goes unnoticed, while potential does not exist until you realize it. There are quite a lot of geniuses. Newton wouldn't have become what he became if he had not probably been bullied. It started that he was an average student in class until he discovered that the best way he would satisfy his bullies was to prove that he was smarter than them. You understand?
So he learned that skill.
Stephen Hawking was an average student in his class until he reached the university and he started doing wonders.
Doing the grand design.
Then you see Einstein was not. At one point, he would fail to enter a certain college.
He actually failed several times in primary, and then went ahead and discovered the theory of relativity, where E is equals mc squared. Anyway, to end this debate, because of the interest of time, I will argue and say that I think it was Thomas Edison who said that being a genius, 1% is inspiration and 99% is perspiration. So find yourself out. God bless.
You've mentioned Thomas Edison.
Yes.
And as a fan of Nikola Tesla.
Nikola Tesla, who had about over 300 patents, by the way. He had about, including
Tesla, you have left me unhappy, but it's from there.
Okay, God bless for now. Thank you.